Oh, you just started pausing out a little bit, but you're back.
Okay. Oh, there you go. All right. Well, Brenda, Florida here. And we are tonight in Zoom instead of the Live Lavishly Facebook group because we just had some technical difficulties there. But anyway, you know, Mercury retrograde and all those things. And I have my beautiful co-host here, Sobia, and
Hello.
she is with us tonight. And so I'm super excited to have you here. And we have, you know, at least right now we have Joyce and Rima and Mila with us live, and others may join us live. And I know that many of you, particularly because we had to switch platforms at the last minute today, may be watching this, you know, in the replay, which is totally cool. We love that too. And just know that whatever questions you have or that come up as we talk, whether you're in YouTube or you're watching this through, you know, one of my Facebook group or something Sobia puts up, send us your questions, because after, you know, we watch these comments and questions in the replays too, so that, you know, we can respond to you. So I think this is going to be super interesting tonight. I know that I've never had any sort of hypnosis. And of course, my perspective of hypnosis is, you know, what all like, you know, 60s, 70s era, you know, kind of comedy TV shows would demonstrate with a hypnotherapist, where, you know, they bring somebody up from the audience and hypnotize them and then have them do really stupid shit that they don't know they're doing, you know. And that's not, Sobia didn't do that to me at all. Okay, I'll just say that right up front.
I'm glad you're clarifying that.
I mean, of
That's
course, I guess
question.
I wouldn't have known, would I?
No, you did. You did know. You did know.
So let me start by saying, if you saw my email this week, Sobia and I met each other 2 years ago, just a little over 2 years ago. We went on a retreat with a coach, mentor. We've both been in several of her programs, Susan Hyatt, who's a super successful coach and helps coaches build their businesses and whatnot. And she did a retreat in Paris for 5 days. And so we went on that retreat and met each other there. And it's interesting because, you know, after 2+ years, for me at least, you're the only one that I've really stayed in contact with. I mean, we're all Facebook friends. And so sometimes like Carmen or Mona are the two most likely that we would comment on each other's stuff. But, you know, it's just always funny when I mean, it was a really fantastic and I don't know if I want to say intense, but intense in a way, not in a negative way at all, to work together and be together and deep dive into each other's lives like we did in Paris. And I was just super impressed with who you are and, you know, the work that you want to do in the world then, and felt a great connection to you. And so, you know, obviously we've stayed connected, but not a lot. Like we, you know, we talk maybe a time or two a year or something, you know. It's not like we're talking all the time. But when I was in San Diego back several months ago, I reached out to Sobia, maybe to do this, actually. That might have been part of why I reached out to get you to co-host. And I didn't even know about the hypnotherapy then. So she's telling me what she's doing. And, you know, so of course I want a session right away, you know. And this was when I was kind of starting to really work again on my condemnation and all that judgment and religious baggage I've had from my super conservative or fundamentalist religious upbringing. And I was like, do you think you can help me with that? And Sobia was like, yeah, bring it on, you know? So we did that. So I'll say more about that later, because it was a really powerful experience for me. And so, and then Sobia also participated in my trip east, because I stayed overnight at her house one night. So that was great to just be with you in person and,
I know,
you know, have dinner
so
and be in your beautiful home was really a treat. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
So tell us, well, so first of all, tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and your background, and then let us know, and, you know, maybe I'll interrupt you because that's what I'm prone to do. But then, you know, let us know how you went from, because you're certified as a Martha Beck life coach, SMI, but how that, you know, how you got led in your own professional journey then into the hypnotherapy or whatever, you know, the rapid transformation process. So take it away, Sobia.
Okay, so
I
you're
froze
starting
for
to
a
cut out.
second. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm still freezing. Anyway, I'll be literally freezing if I go to the router because the room isn't heated where it is. Oh, hey, Teresa. How are you? Happy to see you here tonight. And ladies, you can, we'll probably take some pause times and let you just unmute yourselves and ask a question since we don't have a ton of people. But also in the chat down on most devices, down along the bottom, if you hover over the bottom of this Zoom box, you're going to see a chat bubble. And if you click on that or tap that, you can type a question in there. So feel free, you know, as we're talking also, to just type any questions that you might have in there for me or Sobia, and we'll answer those there. So, so take it away, Sobia. Tell us about yourself and your journey.
Well, first, I'm so happy to be here, and thank you, Brenda, for having me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been, yeah, so amazing that 2 years after Paris, I love that we're still in touch. I love that you were here 2 weeks ago.
I know.
Spent the night with me, and yeah, it's been so great to be on this journey with you. And we love to always say we'll always have Paris. So
yeah,
we love to tell people that.
We went to the Eiffel Tower together.
We did.
Yeah.
We definitely did. Yeah, that was such an amazing experience. And at that time, so like Brenda says, I was certified as a life coach back in like 2014 or 15. It's all a blur now. But at the time, I was going through some intense personal things, a divorce, and just things like that. And a lot of things were coming up for me that I hadn't really dealt with. So there was a lot of cultural stigma around divorce. And
because you're originally, or your family, you're born in the US, but your parents came here from Pakistan. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. So I was born in Chicago and raised in Chicago, but raised in a very traditional Pakistani household. And I was married to somebody who is also American, but Pakistani American as well. So just going through my divorce was bringing up so many things for me, just in terms of, mindset and how do I get through this and how can I break this mold? In some way, somehow I followed the breadcrumbs to Martha Beck. I just remember I started reading and I remember being on her page and just knowing that, okay, I have to do this. And
I felt the same way. I was so drawn to what she's doing, her work, and then how she described, how she trains coaches. Because that was I had been in so much therapy before. Oh, goody, here's Joy too. I had been in so much therapy before I got into coach training. I knew that I had to be in a coaching program that would be congruent with what I already had been through, like emotionally being in therapy for all this time and being with a really, really great therapist. And I've ever since I found Martha's work, I've been super, super drawn to it. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah, I was exactly the same. And at the time, I actually, as the separation started, I started therapy, and somehow when I didn't find it to be as helpful for me, and I probably just didn't find the right therapist for myself. But when I started coach training and I started to learn some of the mindset tools and, just everything that we could do and everything that we hold on to, it was like a lifesaver during my divorce. And so that was amazing. And as I was going through that process, I was training. And then after that, I really had, this desire to work with women, and mostly with women of multicultural backgrounds on some of that, cultural conditioning.
Yeah.
Well, and then when we were in Paris, that's some of the work that I was talking about. Well, kind of fast forward, I was realizing as I was, we always talk about peeling the layers of an onion, right? So as you're peeling the layers of an onion, you think, oh, I'm done. And then you're like, oh no, there's a little bit more to work through. Yeah. And in 2018, probably like the end of 2017 or 2018, I was realizing that I'm still, holding myself back. There's still some deeply rooted things within me and with some of the clients that I'm seeing way that we can get to that conditioning a little bit faster and a little bit of a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another thing where I was like following the breadcrumbs, and I was led to a woman named Marissa Pierce somehow. And she had this therapy called rapid transformational therapy.
Okay.
And rapid transformational therapy is rooted in hypnotherapy. And you're essentially taking an issue and you're finding the root cause of it in a session. And while you're in a session, you are transforming the belief right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
What makes it different is that because you're in hypnotherapy, you're in a mind state that's suggestible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we know now from, a lot of people studying this is that 90% of the way we behave and the way we act in the world is because of our subconscious mind,
mm-hmm.
right? So what we're doing in our conscious life, I mean, that's basically like, if you think about your computer, you can only do as much with your computer as your operating system allows.
Mm-hmm.
And they say basically in the first 7 years of your life, you are kind of in a hypnotic state. You're in this theta brainwave state and you're absorbing everything around you. And it doesn't matter what the intention of our caretakers or teachers or anything was. What matters is the meaning that we created out of our
mm-hmm.
experiences. And
mm-hmm.
we stored that meaning in our database. It's basically it's our program, right?
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what we do throughout our life, unless we change that program, it's always running in the background. So
mm-hmm.
I might say, I'm a confident, powerful woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a confident, but deep down inside, I don't believe I'm worthy, right? Because that's
mm-hmm.
a belief that I came up with when I was a child, or, growing up when I was impressionable. And that's still running in the background. And that's why doing certain things just feels like I'm just pushing against something. It feels like I'm trying to climb up this mountain with boulders on my back, because we have those deeply rooted belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So so hypnotherapy, or the type that I do, rapid transformational therapy, is really about changing that program.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have found it so amazing. So now I do programs, and I still think coaching is amazing as well. So I do rapid transformational therapy. We get to the root cause of an issue. We start to shift your mindset, and then you got a recording for 21 days, which is to really like strengthen that neural pathway. And in that, I would support you through coaching as well, because things will come up. Things will come up when you get your new beliefs.
Yeah, I think for me, so perfect, example then would be my case, because,
right.
Those religious dogmas that created enormous, limiting beliefs for me, with the condemnation and that doctrine of original sin, that we're all born flawed and defective, and, all of that I was taught at the, all through those ages where, when, kids are little and they're up in those alpha brain waves, they don't have a filter, any analytic abilities to be like, oh, well, that's my mom and she's crazy, or that's, whatever, they're being mean, or that's them, you just don't have that as a kid. And so I just, took all that in its truth, and whatever also then goes with my personality, and whatever my own soul lessons in this lifetime, I took all of that as if it were absolutely true. And never, I was in my 30s before I even left the church. So even as a teenager, I'm knocking on doors, going door to door to save people, and, preach to them about how they're going to go to hell and all this stuff, because I just bought it hook, line, and sinker. And so, fast forward to, this year, 58. Now, when I was in therapy in my 30s, I knew that there was some negative imprints on me from that. And so I can remember working through a lot of that stuff with my therapist. And I would have said, until this year, I've dealt with that. Like, I'm good there. That stuff isn't affecting me anymore. And then just, I think with the intensity of some of the initiations in my life this year, I can't even remember how it happened, but anyway, one day I was just like, you know, I okay, am I back?
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, hello.
I was like, oh my gosh, this just sounds like all that old condemnation stuff
Right.
that I thought was gone. So I had kind of figured that out, that was getting triggered again, and that it wasn't all gone.
Mhm.
When we talked that day. So we did our session, and it was so powerful, just the process that you took me through to bring up these old memories, some of which, maybe if I might could have guessed would come up in my memory, not like I thought about them before we got in the session, but when you
Mhm.
took me through the process and I thought of them, like afterwards, it wasn't a surprise to me that they came up. They weren't repressed memories.
Mhm.
But details that I had repressed, that I would have said, I don't know those details, when you had me, whatever that is, in that hypnotic state, I remember details that I
Yeah.
did not previously remember. And just, the process, I mean, you can't really describe it exactly, but it was so powerful for me. And not the least of which was that the recording that you did. So
Mm.
one of the things Sobia does when you go have a session with her, which I recommend for everyone, is she sends you this like questionnaire thing that, of course I'm a good girl, so I did my
Yes, you
yeah.
were really good about your questionnaire. I loved
So
it.
one of the things that she asked was things about my future that I wanted. I can't
Mhm.
remember how the question was worded, but whatever. And I'm very clear on that, because I spent, I do a lot of work with Dr. Joe Dispenza too, and he's very big on, as does Teresa. That's how we got to know each other. He's very big on, creating your future self, very consciously creating, who do you want to be,
Yeah.
and so that was really easy for me to be clear about. But what was really fun for me was that when we went through that, because I did that, Sobia's feeding back to me, so to speak, as she's recording this message to me that she said to me when I was in the session, and then sent me afterwards that part of, that recorded part of the session, so I could keep listening to it for those 21 days, because it was so personal. You're
Yeah.
not just saying, and so you feel empowered, and so you feel gratitude,
Mm-mm.
and so, and that's lovely. That would be lovely. You could be that general, but, and it would still be applicable, but these were things very specific to me and what I
Yeah.
want to see in my future. And so listening to I mean, there were a lot of days I listened to it more than once a day,
I
because
love
if I
that.
was having a bad day, man, I'd pop that, audio in and just listen to you talk me through how I don't need the condemnation. It doesn't serve me anymore. That was an old belief. Like, the words that you used in that recording were so powerful. I'm sure that's not an accident. That was probably part of the training. But it was super, super powerful for me, because I felt like by the end of that 21 days, I almost felt like I can't even remember this being a problem.
Oh, I love
You
hearing
know,
that. Yeah.
like, to think that
Hmm.
21 days ago, I felt so burdened by this.
Yeah.
Now I almost don't remember that it was a problem. I mean, that's a pretty significant change.
I love hearing that. And that's, first of all, kudos to you, for going through the process, for knowing that I'm having a bad day. I need to maybe listen to this recording a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the great thing about the recording, because it's basically, like you brought this up, that the hypnosis is not like a party trick or, a Las Vegas trick or whatever. It's kind of like a really deep guided meditation. Like, let's
Mm-hmm.
put it that way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Would you say that that's how you?
That's a great way to describe it, because I
Yeah.
do all these guided meditations of Dr. Joe's, and it was very much, but it was deep. It took me deeper. Not that, I mean, people go really deep with his stuff, so we don't have to compare. But
Yeah.
in that session, I went way deeper
Right.
than I do on my own, when I'm in a
Yeah.
guided meditation. And I think, like, I wonder, well, so tell us the kinds,
Oh,
I mean,
you're starting to
obviously
cut
we
out
don't,
again.
oh, did I freeze? Am I
You
back?
did a little bit, but you're back
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Tell us the kinds of things, like, obviously you're not going to say anything that would be confidential as far as identifying people and stuff unless they've given you permission, as I have, to blab all over, all the great stuff you did for me. But tell us the kinds of things that you've helped people with. Like, does this work for anything, or is it more suited to certain issues, or?
I think it works for everything. And this is the the reason I say that is that the root cause of an issue, whether it manifests physically in your life or like as a physical ailment, or it manifests as like a habit, like smoking or biting your nails, or as a confidence issue, it really does just stem from those deep belief systems, no matter how it's showing up in your life right now. So I've worked with people who are biting their skin to the point that they're having to walk around with bandages and they're embarrassed, to someone who's afraid of public speaking. And you go back to similar types of things. They're really kind of rooted in your enoughness and worthiness and things like that. It just kind of shows up differently, right? So, I mean, just yesterday, and just to kind of talk to how clear something will come up, I worked with a girl yesterday who was just talking about having a mental block. She just kept saying, I have a mental block. It's, I'm just stuck. It's impacting every area of my life. Like, she couldn't actually pinpoint which area of her life. And when we regressed, we went to a funeral scene where she was 4 years old. And at that moment, it was her grandfather's funeral. And at that moment, she disconnected from love, basically like love. It's like she felt from that moment that she was kind of disconnected, and that disconnection in different ways has followed her throughout her life. And so I could literally feel like this weight lifted off of her after because what's happening is you're processing the scene. And I tell everybody, you're safe. You're not going through it again. You're reviewing it again, but now you get to process the scene, because when we don't process something, it's just holding onto us, right? It's like that clenching. You can actually feel it in your body, like this clenching. And when you let it go, your chest opens up and you can breathe deeper. And so if you have stress in your life from different things that you're holding on to that are clenching you, right? Maybe that stress is going to show up as like, I need to, smoke a cigarette to like relax, or I need, or I could never get up on stage and, It just is going to show up in different ways, but the root causes are very similar.
Yeah.
And so that's why it can work for so many things.
So that's interesting to me, because for me, because of other traumas I had, sexual abuse and whatever, when I was little, I was very disconnected from myself, and so that's really that's really what I was working on with my therapist for all those years in my 30s. But I'm guessing that this could have helped me, like, with that kind, when there's that kind of separation. It's funny, I was watching Grey's Anatomy the other day, and there's this one gal, and she's talking to her therapist, and the girl was she's a woman, but was adopted, and the therapist was asking her, like, whatever about that, and she was like, well, I got adopted by these people who really loved me, and whatever, when I was 5 days old. So, like, she's kind of like, so why is this such a big deal for me? And the therapist was like, well, listen, 5 days is a lot. Like, anything could have happened to you in those 5 days before you got connected to these loving parents, that made that kind of a imprint that created a separation. That's the way I'm going to say it. A separation from self.
Oh my God, yeah.
That sense that you're so, which is what my condemnation did, and all that religious upbringing is, everything's outside of me. I'm not connected to anything. It's
Pausing again.
so it's all out there, and I've got to figure out somehow how to be good enough, to get love, to get, be good enough for God, whatever, be good enough for my parents. So how does that can you connect, without anything more specific than that, can you kind of connect the dots on how RTT can help with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually amazing because, so with our conscious mind, we can't always remember back to, I don't think I remember anything younger than 4. I think my first conscious memories are like a 5 and above,
Okay.
But in hypnosis, we've had people going as far back as the womb, like, believe it or not, because you can sense the stress of your mother you can't maybe put words to it, but you can sense feelings. I think if your mom is stressed, you can feel that, and I actually, in hypnosis, in one of my sessions, have gone back to when I was an infant as well. So our subconscious mind holds on to everything, whether you're, whether you're in the womb, whether you're 5 days old, whether, you're 4 years old. We can't always consciously remember those memories. And so, you can have something that you're holding on to that becomes an imprint for that long within you, right? So that that makes sense to me, that person who was given up for adoption at 5 days old would still have been impacted by that, because that could be perceived as like an abandonment, or my parents don't want me, or something. And even though she'll never know consciously, necessarily, that's impacting her, it can, right? And that's something that even with my son, I've had to pay attention to, because he was only 2 and a half when his dad and I separated, but he's very sensitive about certain things. And I think that he has that kind of fear within him of, when his dad left and things like that. Whereas like some people will say, well, that happened when he was so young, he's never going to remember it. He may not consciously remember it, but that doesn't mean it won't impact him.
Yeah. So I would love to hear, so do you do this? Can you do this to yourself? Can you you probably have people you trained with or whatever, because I assume you've had it done to you a number of times. You've been the client.
Yeah, I mean, we have people that we train with, and we do sessions on each other. But I've also you can do self-hypnosis, and I have done recordings for myself. It's not as easy, because I'm trained in it, I can get deep, as a coach, I can get myself into a state where my conscious mind, and this is an important aspect to bring up as well. We're talking about our conscious mind, but our conscious mind tends to be really, just running and zooming, and it can't calm down. And that's the great thing about hypnosis, is that we calm it down so that what needs to come up naturally rises to the surface, right? And I can, now that I've done this enough, get myself to a calm enough place that I can kind of communicate myself with whatever is happening, to figure out what's the purpose of it. And that's, and that leads me to another point, which is what you learn in all of this is that every belief, every habit, every emotion is there for a reason. It's not just here to make your life, it seems like it's making your life harder, and why are you trying to do this to me? But it actually usually has a benevolent purpose. It usually thinks, your fear of condemnation was trying to protect you. So when you can communicate with that part of you that's holding on to a belief, and really with compassion try to understand why, without rejecting it, you have so much more room. You have so much of that. You gain that ability to free it, right? You understand why it's there. You get what you want from it, and then you can, with compassion, set it free.
Yes. So I love all that. There's so much there, because I really, after being a coach for several years, and so some of this I, really observed working with other people, but also all the coaching. Did I freeze? Am I
A little
back?
bit, yeah.
Okay. All the coaching I did, on myself, and same thing with other coaches. When you're in coach training, you're always coaching each other and that kind of thing.
Right.
And it took me a while to, put my finger on this, but I realized really what a hindrance it is to our personal growth when we're critical instead of loving.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us are sort of conditioned unconsciously or overtly, very consciously, that being hard on ourselves
Mm-hmm.
is going to be the way to, that it's that sort of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and, quit your whining and, like go, get over it. And so we can, I find most people, or myself included, can be very, very hard on themselves. And they're thinking that without that, maybe they would just be lazy asses or something, right? Like that's part of our culture, is to think that that's necessary for the drive to go do these things. And what I've realized over the last, especially couple years, is that really the best way to create any transformation in your life is to love yourself into it.
Yeah.
And so I think, even though that's not exactly how we talked about it when we were doing the hypnotherapy, the RTT, I think that's part of what I liked about the process, is knowing that I felt like the way you do that, the way you did that with me, allowed me to let go of it through compassion and love, instead of yuck, awful, I don't want you, get this thing out of my life, who the hell needs condemnation, who needs all this punishment, get it out of here. Instead of that, it was very much sort of that understanding that, this came up for me when I was little to protect me.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, had a benevolent origin.
Mm-hmm.
It just simply doesn't serve me anymore, so I'm ready to let it go.
Right.
That's a completely different energy, and for me, a completely different result than, especially the years I was in therapy. And I don't blame my therapist for this. This was just part of my own journey of just, I was just trying to browbeat myself
Mm-hmm.
into not doing something the way I used to do it, or not thinking the way I used to think, or whatever. And to a degree, I guess it worked. But this is a whole lot kinder and gentler to love yourself into, sort of your
Right.
evolution, instead of willpower or, criticizing or browbeating yourself.
Yeah, and it's so much less exhausting. And and like you and everybody else, we think we're going to punish ourselves into better behavior, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to like work hard and we're going to do this. But that's again us fighting against, right? Fighting against willpower is like fighting against your nature.
Mm-hmm.
Because your nature, there's a part of you that doesn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why doesn't it want to do it? Like, let's find out, right?
Yeah.
And you and I have worked together on stuff. Like, there's still stuff like, I don't want to do it. Well, why don't I want to do it? And the better route to figure out is why not? With compassion versus like, I hate you, get away. And that's where we become, when we have that energy of, I don't like this part of myself. I never, and maybe even that part of yourself, that sexually abused part of yourself, you become fragmented. Like, there are different parts of you that have experienced different things, and you kind of repress them so that this other part of you can come up, and, and then we become these like kind of like different people, and we don't always work as a whole. We don't feel complete because at some point that part that you're repressing gets triggered, right? And comes up. And then you don't know how to handle it. And now I say, when something's getting triggered, that's an invitation, right? If you feel uncomfortable or something's getting triggered repeatedly, that's an invitation for you to take a look.
Yes.
See,
I
hear
love that.
what it wants to say to you.
Yeah, it is. It's such an invitation. I mean, that's really, that's, it's a great word for looking at the things that come up, for us, that
Yeah.
rather than, because again, with my orientation, I would tend to think of it like almost like a punishment, like the concept of learning a lesson
Yeah.
meant like that sounds kind of noble and, emotionally healthy, but behind that was a meaning for me
Mm-hmm.
that meant things had to be hard. I was going to have to be punished and all this bad stuff, but at least I'd come out with a lesson, right? Like the lesson was kind of the silver lining, and
Mm-hmm.
shifting to a mindset of, which is why I like the word initiation, because that feels kinder and gentler to me, than
Right.
a problem or a challenge or whatever, to just say, hey, this is just part of my growth and it's happening for me. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it may not be any fun, that doesn't mean, I run around saying, shitty things or wonderful things, but
Right.
it's just a different orientation to what's, whatever word you want to use, difficult, or what is coming up to initiate you into your next way to love yourself, and through compassion raise yourself to a higher vibration.
Yeah. And of course, yeah, this isn't about denial or like spiritual bypassing, like you said. Like, we're not just trying to say, well, everything's great and
Yeah,
everything, it doesn't mean it's easy. Like, everything being an invitation, and it doesn't mean that you and I do it perfectly or anything like that.
right.
It
God knows I don't.
yeah, it means, it being an invitation means like, we're gonna sit with it. Might be hard to look at that part, but we're gonna do it,
Yeah,
and we're
I want to
gonna.
say yes to that invitation. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, ladies, while we'll stop and breathe here for a second. Who has a question? And either you can drop it in the chat, or you can probably unmute yourself. Or let's see, I'll try to I think I can unmute everybody here. So anybody who, unless you've muted yourself, then I can't unmute you. Anybody who has a question or comment or whatever, let us know. What's on your mind. Anybody have anything you want to ask?
It looked like Joy might for a second, but
Okay.
I
If
don't.
I can unmute you, Joy. Joy, can you see your little microphone thing and tap that? It has a red line across from it. Because I am not, there we go.
Yes, but it's very loud here. I didn't have a question. I just muted myself so I wouldn't distract anybody else.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Awesome. I'm so glad you're here. Yeah. So anybody else, I mean, we can keep riffing here for a little bit. But if you have any questions, we love to answer those. Sobia, what do you think is the most maybe dramatic thing, either for yourself or someone else, that you've seen, heal or have a great experience with RTT?
One that was very dramatic at our training was, and I missed this, but it's just something that sticks out in my mind.
Yeah.
Was a woman who was on a wheelchair who started walking after an RTT session.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
they literally started walking after the session.
That is dramatic.
So that was insane.
Yeah.
But I've seen, different things where they don't make, I think the things that are dramatic for me is that, like, you wouldn't think of it, right? And even for them, those scenes don't make sense to, like, and they're basically out of their conscious mind. They were like surprising scenes, surprising reasons, somebody struggling. There was a woman who was, she had been struggling, for example, with her body image and her weight for so long of her life. And one of her reasons was she was holding on to it was because of sexual abuse when she was a child. And so that was protecting her.
Yeah.
And she had never put that together, And then, so that's, that, and so when like those light bulb moments are always like, whoa, I never put that together.
Yeah.
And, one of my clients who was, just fighting her skin for, like, she just couldn't understand it. That for her was a light bulb moment, was that it was the only thing she could control when her parents were going through a divorce.
Mm. Well, we froze up here. Hopefully everyone will come back here in a second. Hang with us.